Man, it is so good to hear that music. We are back. We are live. Dynasty Saturday Night 5, Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast on the Going for Two Live Network here on the Going for Two Live YouTube channel. Please subscribe, rate, and review to the Going for Two Live audio feed. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel here. Like the video, comment, bells for notifications, all that jazz. Feed the algorithm monster what it must be fed. It's been a while. Josh, how you doing?
Good. You know, that music does come in a little bit louder than everything else, but it's a good wake-up call. Get my ADHD brain in the mood to go live. So it's good to hear that again. It's good to be back. Honestly, a much-needed hiatus we had, but it's really good to be back. Perfect time of the year. We're about halfway through. I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, we really thank folks for having the patience with us. We had, some shows that just we had to cancel. We had a pre-record 1 week. Just life getting really lifey, And I don't want to speak for anybody else, but myself. But it's important that we prioritize things. As much as I love fantasy football and spend probably way too much time on it. I had some really rough mental health stuff. I had COVID. I had some life stuff come up. I was in DC on a march trying to stop a genocide. These things are more important than fantasy football. And and it's also important to remember that on the other side of the keyboards and the screens and things like that, when we're in our fantasy football leagues and on Twitter, are other human beings who are holding a lot and have, work and life and mental health and all these things that we've been dealing with, the last few weeks. All right. Well, it's been a year. I mean, it's been a weird year. It's been a season, right? It's been a time. So it's weird, right? So it's like week 10. And it's almost like I'm still waiting for the season to start because I'm like, oh, this can't be real. This can't be real. Oh, this guy's injured. Oh, this person's been and it's like, nah, this is what the NFL is now. It's injuries, it's low scores, it's unders hitting and underdogs not covering, and defenses playing in such a way that limits explosive plays, promotes intermediate passes, which, by the way, quarterbacks aren't completing at any higher rate, even though they're being given those intermediate passes to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just been ugly and weird, and it's been a tough season for me to really wrap my mind around. Maybe because I've been going through all this life stuff too, but what are your thoughts so far on what's been going on?
The main things that caught to my attention listening to you just now is it's really going to change, I think, how I draft moving forward, because the few teams that I'm really struggling in are teams that actually paid up. I, just said screw rounds 14 through 20. I'm going to try and get the top guys. They get hurt. And now my bench is like pretty ugly. And I got Brandon Powell in a super flex spot in one of my leagues. So it's like, what are we doing here? So I think if anything, I'm going to give it the rest of the year, see how it turns out. But I'm definitely going to reevaluate. And I'm going to talk about a few things to reevaluate through the points, but definitely going to reevaluate how I move forward and just expect a lot more injury turnover. Seems to be the way that's headed. So, and I think the NFL is catching up with that. So,
I was going to recite a list of prominent players who have missed time from either injury or holdout or both. And I was going to go position by position. And it would take the entire hour of our episode. Yep. I know injuries are always a thing. And I know every year we say, gee, these injuries seem like, but every year it seems like there's more injuries. And there's shorter preseason and lack of two-a-days. And a lot of the boomers will tell you that, the players are soft now or whatever. And teams, I think it's more a function of teams being a lot more careful with their multi-million-dollar investments and the culture around the concussion scandal and that sort of thing. But 60% of the league is questionable every week, and everybody's missed time, and injuries, buys. It's just effing ugly out there. So like I almost wanted to name this episode Everything Everywhere is Awful All the Time. I have just had a terrible time keeping track of and watching NFL football this year. But also like then it makes it where it's interesting, like, okay, so like how do I adapt and where do I find the edge?
Yeah, I've been able to kind of take advantage of it, not so much in DFS, but more in the betting market. Seeing some of these new guys come in, don't expect much from Tommy Bagent or DeVito, guys like that. So I've just been trying
It
to
might
go
as
about
well
it
be
like that.
Tommy Bagent, right? Like just blend them all together, right?
Yeah, I got his first name right. I realized I got Tommy DeVito and Tyson Bagent mixed up. But yeah, it's been weird. I thought last year the quarterback situation got bad, but it's gotten even worse this year. So I don't know. It's been kind of tough to watch, but it's been kind of fun at the same time seeing some new people out there, seeing what they got, getting a chance.
So what we're gonna do with this episode essentially is do the whole list of 5 thing. We use lists of 5 as a vehicle to just have a fun way to talk about Dynasty fantasy football, and we're gonna do that mainly with just like our observations on what's been going on this year, and then maybe some thoughts on like how to move forward based on those observations. So before we get to our lists of 5, let's pay the bills. Underdog certainly got a lot of money from me this summer. And they are the sponsor of today's show. They got everything. They got sports besides football. They got DFS now. The best ball season and hot best ball summer is over. They've got the DFS streets. They've got pick'ems, for folks who are in states where that's legal. It's weird, right? Because in Jersey, we have sports gambling that's legal. We have DFS that's legal, but we don't have. But the pick'ems, the daily fantasy sports betting I can't access it. It's weird. But anyway, if you're in one of those states and you're lucky enough, head on over there and do some pick'ems as well. So why am I talking about this? If you are a new account on Underdog, you can deposit as much as you want, and Underdog will match up to $100 of that deposit if you use the promo code GF2. If you're watching here on video, we have this, nice shiny QR code that you can scan. Go to underdog.com, the Underdog app as well, whatever you want to do. Put that first deposit in. They'll match up to $100. Promo code GF2. Put some money down. Start playing. Get some action. Maybe even start winning. All right, Josh, you want to start us off with our lists of 5 on this miserable NFL season now that nobody's listening anymore?
Yeah, so I'll start off with what I just mentioned. The first point I have is that bad quarterback play and injuries are trickling down better than Reaganomics ever dreamed of. So a few of the main injured quarterbacks you probably all know. Just a reminder, we got Justin Fields, he's missed time. Anthony Richardson out for the year. Deshaun Watson's been really bad. Daniel Jones tore his ACL. Kirk Cousins is out for the year, Stafford, and then Aaron Rodgers. And that's really affected a lot more than just the value you get from them. I mean, Justin Jefferson went from when he first got hurt saying he'd try to be back in 5 to 6 weeks to now saying he's not trying to rush back. It makes sense for him. So I don't blame him. Richardson could be an injury risk moving forward. He did have surgery on his throwing shoulder. I don't know how long it's going to take to build that back up or if there's a chance of re-injury. I didn't move him down or anything, but these are going to be conversations moving forward. The weird thing about that, though, it did actually boost the value of Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor, him going down, a lot more touchdown chances for them. The Daniel Jones injury really killed Saquon, and all of their slot receivers are basically useless outside of maybe Wandale. With Daniel Jones, you could have thrown them in for a bye week replacement, but now it just feels like, especially with Waller hurt, you have no one to go to on that. And Saquon, you don't even feel great about it where you got him because they're going to be stacking the box. Watson's killed the value of Amari Cooper and David Njoku. He's finally got it going, but it took PJ Walker to get that started. And honestly, the biggest injury blow is probably Matthew Stafford getting hurt because Puka Nacua went through one of the biggest ascensions I've ever seen from a rookie from where he was drafted to where he is now. And with Brett Rippon, even if they go get somebody else, I don't know if they sign Wentz or if that was just a rumor. But either way, I think Kupp's going to be fine, but I think it's going to be a pretty big hit to Nacua for this year. And then Garrett Wilson went from being a top 10 wide receiver to solely based on volume from Zach Wilson, who's pretty terrible. And that's also affected Breece Hall too, because they're not afraid of Zach Wilson throwing. So it's really done a number to fantasy football and a lot more angles than just you losing a quarterback.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And it's because I love DFS. I've been getting more into it. I took a break week 9. I just wasn't able to do it. Just COVID and the political stuff that I was doing, just prepping for the march and all that. But it's like I'll sit there and be like, all right, well, oh no, all right, well, no.
Yeah.
And it's like you're really sort of having to get creative to find like the edge of what players are going to do well. And that and the trickle down is a very, very interesting way of putting it. I'll vault from that into my quarterback point, which is very similar, and that is I just hate quarterbacks. Like there's so few quarterbacks that we can truly trust. And the gap between the sort of elite quarterbacks that we thought and everybody else in a way has gotten smaller, but also it's more important to have them, I think. So what do I mean by that? Well, especially in the first few weeks of the season before Mahomes and Kelsey really went off in what was that, like week 6 or 7, maybe something like that, right? The elite quarterbacks that people were taking, the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks that had that rushing added to them, weren't delivering relative to the rest of the pack, right? Quarterback performance, quarterback scoring was pretty flat. We were in the DFS streets every week saying, oh, I might as well pay down, to like a $5,800 quarterback because nobody at the top is really giving me anything extra. And I looked down my list of my rankings of like, how many quarterbacks do I truly love? And am I truly comfortable with in my Dynasty roster now? Me and Jesse on Dynasty Fever, we talk about quarterback circle of trust. It's like I got the top 4, Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Lamar. Got Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. Without Mike Williams and with Kellen Moore's offense not firing on all cylinders, right? Trevor Lawrence, again, love him, the talent. I think he'll grow into being like a top 5 quarterback at some point, but he hasn't been setting the world on fire. Richardson out with the shoulder. CJ Stroud, okay, great. And I think people are like now calling him like top 5, top 3 quarterback. It's like, let's relax, But still, okay, he's in the circle of trust. Tua doesn't rush, and you take him out of that off. Like he's a quarterback. I guess here's the point I'm making. How many quarterbacks are truly the team does well and their other pieces on the fantasy wise do well because of them or just with them? And in some ways, despite them, right? Kyler just coming back, from the injury. A new offense. We don't know how it's going to look with him in it. Fields has struggled. Dak is starting to turn it on. But again, and now you're getting down to like, Deshaun Watson, Bryce Young, Jared Goff, Stafford, Purdy, Howell, Geno, Russ. Like I don't want any of these guys. Like it's all flat. It's all like, yeah, right. So in other words, the circle of trust is small. And as you pointed out, it's trickling down to other pieces. And maybe that window of like, oh, now you're supposed to like, in the redraft streets, now you're supposed to draft quarterbacks a little higher and you don't have to wait on them. It might be over now. Like the gap between, but here's the thing. The problem is like, and I'm kind of all over the place because we're rusty, but like any of those 4 guys can go off and break fantasy and maybe even Burrow sometimes too. So having them is important, but they're not delivering the way that we wanted them to.
Yeah, the thing about those quarterbacks, them being disappointing is still 20 points a game. It's just not the 28, 30 points a game you get. Yeah. So I think with these other quarterbacks, like you'll have a few boom weeks where they get 25, 30 points, but you're also going to get some games where it's like 6 to 10 points, and you're just not going to get that with the top guys because they either have a rushing floor that's high enough or they're in they're just good enough or in good enough situation where, their talent will win out. So I think that's it, but I do think it is diminishing, but I think it's also, like you said, makes it more important to get those because it gives you that very solid floor.
So believe it or not, second chance, in-season, mid-season, degenerate startup drafts are around the corner. You're in the first round of a usual Superflex startup draft. How many quarterbacks do you think should go before the first non-quarterback? I've always been a stubborn Superflex boomer saying, hell, I'll take 10 or 12 before I touch Jefferson or Chase. I'm 4, 5, maybe.
Let's see. I'm looking at it here. Before Jamar Chase, because I moved Jamar Chase up ahead of Jefferson. Now, I don't know, but 5. Yeah, 5. Joe Burrow's where I cut it off. And then after that, it's Herbert, Fields, and then I have Stroud at 8, which I'll talk about later. But I think I would take Jamar Chase, even Christian McCaffrey over them. McCaffrey's getting 30 points a game.
Thing about Stroud is, listen, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not trying to pour cold water on him and be just contrarian for contrarian's purpose, right? But, he had a very good matchup with Tampa Bay last week when he blew up. And the offensive coordinator, Slovic, who I think we all underestimated, finally said, like, okay, well, this whole, like, trying to run thing just ain't working with the offensive line we have. And with the way that Dameon Pierce runs, he's more fit for, like, power running and gap than he is for a zone scheme. So basically we have to pass, right? And they threw 19 first down passes against Tampa Bay, right? And I don't want to say that Stroud is a system quarterback because he delivers the ball very well and he's far exceeding what people thought he'd do in the first few weeks. But he also does have a really good offensive coordinator who understands getting out the ball quickly. And basically, like in a Shanahan system, every play is a running play, right? It's just a matter of you may be throwing it, but it's really a running play because you're getting it to a guy in space to get yak, right? That's what they do, right? So even then, he's not really like what I would say an elite talent. I'd say he's a very good NFL quarterback who also, by the way, doesn't add much rushing upside. So let's pump the brakes with he's a top 5 quarterback.
All right, so my second one, I'm just going to jump into that one.
Please do. We're lingering here on the quarterbacks. Go ahead.
I disagree with you that he's not. I think he is an elite talent. I don't think he's top 5 yet, and I don't have him there. I have him to start out. I have him ranked 8th.
Yeah, I have him 9, so it's not like I'm pissing.
Yeah, I have him ahead of Tua and Anthony Richardson, who I had to bump down a little bit, and then ahead of Lawrence too right now. So, like, I'm happy with him at the end of the first of a new rookie draft, but.
This is one of your things. CJ Stroud is him.
Yeah.
This is
CJ Stroud.
I can see this on the show sheet. All right. Good. Let's have this
the last
conversation.
No, that's what I was saying. I put this in last second, so that's the one I didn't have ready.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I'll just start off with some of the things he's doing so far this year as a rookie. He's 5th in points per game. I always look at points per game instead of total points. He has 19.7. He's ahead of Lamar Jackson, Kirk Cousins, Tua, Justin Fields, Richardson, who was going above him in rookie drafts, and Jared Goff. Mm-hmm. I mean, he has 14 touchdowns and 1 interception is a pretty good, insane rookie year for someone to put up in an entire season. It's only halfway through the year. A lot of the reason is because they cannot run the ball to save their lives. I don't think it's Dameon Pierce's job. Looking at his tape, he's still a really good runner. It's just not a good system for him, and their offensive line is terrible. Mm-hmm. But he's already set rookie records for passing yards in a game, 470 the last game you said, passer rating, and he became only the 6th player ever, not just a rookie, to throw for 450 yards and 5 touchdowns and no interceptions. Mm. So, I mean, he's coming in and just lighting it on fire. He's in the perfect situation to do that. And I'll say, I don't think Bryce Young in the situation would be near as good as CJ Stroud. I think he walked into the perfect setup, the perfect offense. He has better weapons. He has a coach that trusts him. And he has good young weapons to build around, like Tank Dell and Nico Collins, who's breaking out. Mm-hmm. It's a good young core to work with for a year or two. They can just keep getting better together. And the thing I like the most, outside of his decision-making, because he only has 1 interception, is ability to progress through reads. It is a quick system, and if that first read's not there, he's able to move to the next, move to Schultz, move to Tank Dell, and move in the pocket to avoid sacks because their offensive line isn't good. It was kind of bad earlier, but he's gotten better as the year went on. And I think he just looks better than Bryce Young and even Anthony Richardson, who, just relied on his speed and running to get some footwork. So I moved him ahead. I'm comfortable with him at QB8, and if he keeps doing this throughout the year as defenses try to adjust, I'll move him up a little more probably. But I still have Fields ahead of him because I really like Justin Fields, and I think for fantasy with his rushing, I think he's just as good, if not better. So
that's interesting.
Pump the brakes a little bit, yeah.
I love Fields, and I've been defending him for a while, but I have him 12, and I have Stroud 9. So I guess for me, when I say he's not elite, I think he's a very good thrower of the football. I think again, it's a great fit with the offense and all that. What I'm saying is, like, we're gonna value him as much as Joe Burrow. I don't think we're ever gonna say I'll give up 5 first-round picks for him the way that we might for a Jalen Hurts, a Josh Allen, or a Patrick Mahomes. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Unless he gains like some rushing and they start, he can clearly get you 400 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns, then it would change. But until that happens, no.
All right. So my second one then is going to be, speaking of pump the brakes, overreactive dynasty markets. So I changed this a little bit. My original thing was going to be about pumping the brakes on Levis, but pumping the brakes on Levis, I think, is reflective of the idea that, like, increasingly dynasty every year, the markets are overreactive. It's essentially day trading now. A lot of people have, the analogy of, dynasty to the stock market, which is a pretty apt analogy, right? In many ways. And I at this point, we're day trading, or a lot of people are day trading. I think we bring people up and down the rankings too quickly, but it becomes this vicious cycle because we have to overreact because the markets are overreacting, right? So, like, shooting Levis up to like quarterback 12, quarterback 14 might be true in the sense that, like, his price in the market is that right now. But is that really reflective of where you rank him when you consider other factors, right? And so that's just one example. But we're doing that with everybody, I think. And listen, if that's your thing and you have the time to go in there and in your 20 leagues make a million trades based on these highly volatile, fluctuating markets that are essentially like KTC on steroids, right? And if and buy the dips and all that, fine. Me personally, I don't have the time, desire, or energy to go into my 40+ leagues and deal with this nonsense, right? Very regrettably, I actually have an investment portfolio. I'm one of the few communists who actually has capital. It's because I won a lawsuit where my ankle got shattered, right? And I had this money sitting around, and it's like, well, let's maybe try to grow it so I can retire. And I have like 21 different screens on like things I won't allow my guy to invest in. And it's basically like, like justice oriented things, right?
Yeah.
And so it really limits the growth of it, right? And but all that to say, I slow roll with that. Me and him, we slow roll with that. We don't day trade with that. It's just like, it's there. It's going to grow at a certain rate over a certain amount of time. Maybe there'll be a little bit there for me to augment my retirement if I don't keep dipping into it to pay the bills now, which is what I'm doing, and it pisses my guy off. And I'm like, bro, like, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. Anyway, that's how I look at Dynasty. I am I know that I'm slower to react than some people, and sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm wrong. But, I don't know. I think in the end, 55% to 45% bets, like, I'll win more of them than I'll lose. And like, so I traded Will Levis after the first game for Pop Douglas in 2 seconds. Right now, in a couple weeks after he shreds Tampa Bay this week, is he maybe going to be worth, I don't know, a first and a second, a first and 2 seconds? Yeah, maybe. Right. But my conviction on the player is that fairly soon that price is going to go back down because he's not going to perform. You know, the league's going to get tape on him. They're not going to play vanilla defenses. They're going to realize under pressure he's not really good. And if he doesn't improve, you know, then that's dangerous. You know, his footwork 10 weeks into the season is still bad. I mean, you know, under pressure, small sample size, but still under pressure, he's still bad, which was one of our biggest concerns about him. So I know I'm like dumping on Levis, but the idea here is that I'm really sick of these overreactive, you know, dynasty markets that are day trading, and I'm out. Like, I know I'm slower than everybody else, and that's okay.
So you're not Wall Street bets. You're more of the slow investment, let it grow over time instead of trying to.
Yeah. I don't even. Is that the Reddit that like pumped up AMC or whatever?
Yeah. And GameStop. Yeah, I got in on that back in the day. It was fun. But no, I agree. It comes in waves, and I think this Levis thing is a wave, and you just kind of got to ride out the wave and trust your analysis of the player, and just wait for it to correct itself back to normal, like you said. So I think that's a good way of putting it, because you know stocks go up and down, but portfolios like the Dow, it's steadily going up consistently without those major drops. So yeah, I like that. Let's see. But also Richard Levis still isn't accurate on his throws either, so he's got to do that and footwork and all that. So
yeah, and you know, listen, he's had a couple good matches. He's had D-Hop, who can essentially mug people, you know, and not get called.
I was gonna say, like,
OPI, right? Like, come on, like let's be real here.
Yeah, I was watching that. I was like, this is the ultimate karma to watch Will Levis just come and just shit on the Falcons like this. And I was like, because all the shit I've talked about him on this show and on Twitter. So I'm going to go from one bad dynasty position to one that shouldn't be as bad as people think it is. And that's the tight end position. And in a sense, I think the tight end position in dynasty especially is a deep position. And the main reason I say that is, and I've talked about this before, like the tight end output is so small outside of the top 5 to 7 players. Like the difference between tight end 8 and tight end 30 is minimal, especially in like leagues where you're scoring 150, 200 points. Tight end 9 this year is Jake Ferguson. He's averaging 11.3 points per game. Tight end 30 in points per game this year is Pharaoh Brown with 5. So the difference between that is 6 points per game. And I think it really changes how we got to draft tight ends. You either shoot for a top 5 guy, because those guys are the ones that are actually game changers, and they're the ones that give you the biggest advantage of that position. But if you don't get one of those, just wait and get 2 or 3 guys that you know will get you 7, 11 points with maybe some upside, like the Njokus and some of these other guys. When someone gets hurt, also, we've been talking about injuries. The tight end position, if your tight end goes down, you can throw someone in unless you have Travis Kelce. It's not going to be a huge hit. Like Noah Gray's still averaging, I think, 7 points a game with Kelce there. So it's not as big of an impact on your roster. I've got leagues where I got 3 or 4 tight ends, and I've played them all, and I haven't felt like I've been at a disadvantage in any of them. And I don't have too many top-tier tight ends. And the ones I do, I'm not doing as good. So it's just changing how I draft tight end, because the gap between 8 and 30 is 6 points.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of people on board that like either get it the elite ones or don't for a while now. And I struggle with this because I think it's smart in the sense that like what it tells me is don't overpay for like that next rung down, you know, like the Kittles and Goddards and Freiermuths and that sort of thing, right? Yeah. And even Evan Ingram, right? But like, I don't know, but how many of those tight ends are like the really good ones now? Because when you sprinkle in Laporta and when you sprinkle in Kincaid's coming on now, like I don't know how many, right? How many are the like gotta get them or just bail? Like how many quarterbacks are in the circle of trust, right? Like, but I will say this: I recently, when I shuffled up my rankings, the tiers don't show up on the Dynasty rankings on goingfor2.com. I have a tier that's literally tight end 11 to tight end 23 because I think it's just that flat, right? Like, you know, Trey McBride's up there at 11 and Greg Dulcich is down there at 23 because, you know, when he's back on the field and, you know, has a competent, you know, coaching that like can utilize him, I think he can be really good, and maybe that's a stretch, right? Because he's basically been a non-factor this season. But like, I don't know. I got Darren Waller at 20, Jonnu Smith at 19, right? Like, Njoku at 16. Like, are they really like light years behind Trey McBride, Michael Mayer, Luke Musgrave? Like, no. Like, it's just a really flat. So like, calling it deep, I think, is one way to look at it, right? Because like, it might be a little top heavy, but your options in rounds 11, 13 of a startup draft aren't materially different from your options in round 6, 7, right?
Yeah, and the drop off from starters, like you lose McCaffrey. Oh, I got Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell. Like, yeah, you still get 12 points a game, but you're not getting the 30. You know what I mean? It's a lot bigger drop off with quarterbacks, especially like Bajent behind Fields and DeVito. It's like, so it's Myers Smith is my 4th tight end. It's coming to look pretty good now with all these injuries.
Right. Yeah. So like, if Ferguson were to break his femur, like, are Hendershot and Schoonmaker going to be a huge drop off? Probably not. No. Right. And like a lot of teams are set up that way, whereas that's not true at some other positions.
Yeah.
All right. So my third. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I forgot I'm going to touch on this later. It's kind of getting to be the same in running back, but I'll expand on that more a little bit later.
So my third point is going to be about wide receivers. You mentioned Chase being wide receiver 1. I've had him like that for a while. But here's my tier now. Chase is tier 1, and A.J. Brown, J. Jeff, and Lamb are tier 2. They're all the same. I have J. Jeff mixed in there, not just because like he's not scoring points now and that sort of thing, but even if Cousins' Achilles was fine, he's going to be the starting quarterback for Atlanta, Tennessee, San Francisco next year. He ain't going to be a starting quarterback for Minnesota. And I don't know that their path to getting a good one is all that clear. So when I think of Chase and just the great talent and athlete that he is, tied to Joe Burrow, and then I think of A.J. Brown tied to Jalen Hurts, right? And really showing that like he's the guy there. It's not really a 1A and 1B with Devontae Smith, right? And when I think about Lamb and what he's producing, and Dak's contract might be up in 2 years or whatever, but is that really all that big a difference from Jefferson's situation where Cousins has the Achilles and he's not coming back anyway? I don't know. So for me, it's Chase, not just wide receiver 1, but in his own tier, and then AJB, Justin Jefferson, and Lamb in that order in tier 2. I don't know how hot takey that is. I will say this though: buy Kirk Cousins, because as much as Achilles are Achilles, he wasn't rushing. It is his plant foot; it's his right, but he's going to sign a contract, like a 1 or 2 year contract, and be a starting quarterback for a good team with an offense that fits him, probably San Francisco. Goodbye, Brock Purdy. And, so buy him while you can.
Yeah, I like, let me pull this sheet up real quick. I wrote a few things down. So my tier for wide receiver has been the same since the season started. And I've been, before this year, especially even going into last year, once he went to the Eagles, I had A.J. Brown as wide receiver 3. He hasn't moved no matter what goes on. The tier is the same for me. I have one tier. It's Chase, Jefferson, and Brown. And I've had Brown in the same tier as him just because I've always liked his ability to be a target hog. I almost put him down because Devontae Smith, but he's starting to actually take over from Devontae Smith and push him down a little just because he's demanding targets and rewarding Jalen Hurts for throwing him the ball. So I don't think that's a hot take at all, having Jamar Chase in a tier of his own. I haven't done it yet, but that's a pretty good argument with Kirk Cousins being gone. Josh Dobbs is competent, but he's not good at throwing the ball deep, and he's not going to help them lose games to get a good quarterback. So like you said, they're going to be middle of the road, and that's not a good way to get Drake May, Caleb Williams, or even some of these other guys coming out.
I will say this though, it's very possible that it's even worse for Jordan Addison, because not only is he a different kind of receiver that probably thrives from having an alpha there, but he's stuck now on his rookie contract in that situation where we don't know who the quarterback is. Jefferson can leave if he wants, right? So.
Yeah, and that's frustrating because the week right before the Kirk Cousins injury and my one Devy league I'm in, it's my most expensive league. I'm in a win now, and I traded for Jordan Addison and traded my first round rookie pick and my first round Devy pick next season for Jordan Addison, and then Kirk Cousins gets hurt the next game. So it's unfortunate, but he's a good young talent. But yeah, I was a little upset after that. So yeah, that's a good point. I don't have any issues with that. I love the AJ Brown love.
Mm-hmm.
It's my turn.
Yeah,
I'm going to save the running backs for last. And this is mostly me yelling at myself on this one. We need to quit the ageism when it comes to wide receivers. I've just kind of jumbled in running backs and wide receivers. Once you hit 26, 27, you're dust. But looking at the guys, especially at wide receiver, it's a completely different position than running backs, different injuries, different longevities. I didn't bake that enough into my equation. But just to spell it out, we got Tyreek Hill is 29, Diggs is 29, Keenan Allen's 31, Thielen's 33, Mike Williams 29, Evans 30, Devontae Adams 30, Hopkins 31. All these guys are in the top 24 in fantasy points per game.
Cup before the Stafford injury, right?
Yeah, no, even him, absolutely. It's like these guys are vital to winning dynasty championships, especially in year one, unless you're just completely tanking. But even then, they still hold some value. I think it really highlights the importance of getting young wide receivers early. Maybe rounds 1 through 4, and then mixing in some veterans who can help you win in year one, like the Hopkins, Mike Williams, even Thielen now, Keenan Allen. You could all get rounds 5 or 6, and then waiting on running backs. And most of the guys I listed have probably at least 2, maybe 3 to 4 years of production, barring injury. I don't know about Thielen, but the rest of those guys I have a good feeling will be wide receiver 2s or 3s for another 2 or 3 years. And I personally was passing them up for taking shots at Jahan Dotson's, these other young guys who just are not – they might produce over time, but the next 2 or 3 years they're not – I don't think going to have the same output as – some of these other guys.
Yeah, I mean, when we think about some of the guys being taken in rounds 2 and 3 of Dynasty, but also just especially redraft this year, guys like Olave and Waddle and T. Higgins, kind of stand out as like not really meeting, what we want. Devontae Smith, right? What we wanted or expected from them. That's a good point, right? Like it's the old guys who have been producing. And when I reshuffled my rankings, I have Hill and Diggs, in that same tier now with Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Amon-Ra, and I think I'm a little low on Kupp and Adams, quarterback situations, age, things like that, added into what's going on. So like I'm a little lower on them, but so I'll take those young guys that have been disappointing before I take those 2. But even then, like if I'm competing and I need to buy points, like Kupp's probably pretty cheap right now, and Matt Stafford, it's not like he's going to be gone for the whole season, right? So but speaking of Jordan Addison, before we have a trade question here. Are we trading Swift for Addison and Stevenson? If this is Dynasty, hell yeah, I'm doing that, because I still think Stevenson, it's really interesting when you take like the name away and you look at like his finishes. He's been like, not as much as we drafted him for in redraft, but he's been like a solid RB2 in a lot of the weeks that you started him, right? And he still may improve or have good weeks in the second half of the season. You get the young wide receiver and you trade a run. Yeah, I'll do that. What do you think?
No, I agree. Kendrick Bourne being out, Pop Douglas is getting some more looks, but at the same time, they started throwing Stevenson the ball more, and that's really where he got his value when he was, a top 12, top 20 running back. I would do it honestly, even in redraft. Addison hasn't completely fallen off a cliff yet. I don't think he will with Jefferson out. I think there will be enough volume with Dobbs to where they don't really have anyone else to throw to besides Hawkinson. So Dynasty or redraft, I would trade Swift for that because they still got Gainwell and the best running back on the roster, Rashad Penny. So,
and I think, nice one. I think, let's see here. So after some big weeks, week 7 against Miami, Swift had 10.5 points. I think this is half PPR that I pulled up. Against Washington, had 14.4, and then against Dallas had 9.4. Right. I don't know. Is that a trend? Yeah. Like, is it more of like mixing in Gainwell? Is it more like, we're having success throwing to AJ Brown. We don't need to. Whatever the case may be, we're seeing Swift maybe come back to earth a little bit.
Well, I think a lot of it, Jacob Gibbs from CBS and Sportsline, I saw him talking about it on a podcast, how his missed tackle rate has gone down substantially over the last like 3 or 4 games. So I don't know if he just hasn't been used like this in a while. He's not used to this volume or what, but
he's turning it into Detroit on DeAndre Swift. He's turning it into the DeAndre Swift that Detroit was like, he can't really run the ball as much as we thought,
But he's good in the passing, Yeah.
All right, so my 4th point then is going to be, I'm intrigued by Rashee Rice. I know it's not a hot take and like he's getting a lot of buzz, but 0.28 targets per route run, which means 28% of the routes he's running, he's getting a target, which is tied for the 5th highest like number among any wide receiver who's run 75 or more routes. Right. But he's only run a route on 38.4% of Mahomes dropback. So it's a 38.4% route participation. Right. And I get completely that, like, if it's not Tyreek Hill, we really can't trust Kansas City wide receivers. And I get that in Andy Reid's tenure, right, it's not like, fantasy wide receivers were surprising studs. Like, the studs were studs because they were studs, and when he didn't have studs, they weren't studs. Here's the big but I think we have a guy who had some raw talent, who I think him adapting from a group of five school to the KC offense is going a lot smoother than it did for Sky Moore. And he's tied to Patrick Mahomes. Like, the people who have that target rate, like, are, like the targets per route run that are around him, right, are, like guys like Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka, right, AJ Brown, Waddle, Deontay Johnson, Keenan Allen, right? Like, so, I mean, that targets per route run paired with Mahomes and 2nd-round draft capital, I'm intrigued. And let me also add an addendum to this. I'm also intrigued by Quentin Johnston. As much as I was poo-pooing him before the draft, and I still think he's not the prospect that a lot of people thought he was, I think people are perhaps liking Rice too much and hating QJ too much. Like my takes are now like, whoa, pump the brakes. Like, I like Rice, but now everybody likes Rice too much. And I didn't like Johnson. Everybody hates Johnson too much. And I'm like, pump the brakes. And the reason is kind of similar in that before the Mike Williams injury, he was getting his targets per route run was high. They were trying to come up with ways to get him the ball, right? And I think having the Mike Williams and Josh Palmer injuries has thrust him into a situation where it's above where his development level is now. I also think that there's been some really good critiques of Kellen Moore out there as not being this, like, whiz that is really, adding this dynamism to the LA Chargers offense. And they're still not really using him in ways that he probably should be used, right? like he's not Mike Williams. He's a guy where you throw it, drag routes. You throw it to him on drag routes and let him do his yak. That's where he's good, right? He may develop into more than that, but I think if used correctly and targeted more, tied to Justin Herbert, I'm intrigued by him almost as much as I'm intrigued by Rashee Rice, who's getting a lot more buzz.
Yeah, coming in, I can't remember exactly what episode it was, what we talked about, but I talked about Rashee Rice and how I was a little higher on him than consensus during the rookie drafts and all that. I was taking him and Jaden Reed in early to mid-second rounds instead of the Tank Bigsby's and the Charbonnets. So I actually have a good bit of Rashee Rice, and it's honestly more frustrating than if I didn't have him. Because I watch the games and I see, you look at the stats. I was on JWB with Wyatt and Skylar 2 weeks ago, and we talked about Rashee Rice. And I brought up, the targets per route runs just barely under Travis Kelce's, but he's just now being on the field for like 60% of the snaps. So it's frustrating because watching the games, he is open a lot of the routes he runs, but Travis Kelce is also open. And Mahomes throws at Travis Kelce, which is understandable. So It's frustrating. I want them to design plays to get him the ball, and they did the last game. They threw him a screen for a touchdown. So I think they're starting to do that. But yeah, I'm excited. This is kind of what I hoped would happen, and going a little bit better than I expected, honestly. So I hope it just keeps going this direction because I like Rashee Rice. I liked what I saw from him in college too.
I mean, I have them ranked very, very close now. The two wide receivers. One because, yes, positive up, and the other because negative down, and dropping. I got Johnston at 41 and Rice at 42, but whatever, it's the same tier of 39 to 48. So I mean, I don't know. Who would you want to bet on for the rest of their career as having the better career, Rashee Rice or Quentin Johnson?
I think Rashee Rice. I've seen more profiles like Quentin Johnson come in, the Josh Dotsons and some other guys like this who are physical specimens but aren't out consistent playing time. So I think Rashee Rice, even if he's just mid his whole career, is going to be more steady and better overall than Quentin Johnson.
So I'm going to Scott Barrett, Fantasy Points, tweeted out 3 wide receivers who first round draft capital, but also had lower than the 10th percentile on the 3-cone drill. There's been 3 of them. It's Johnston, Jalen Reagor, and Kelvin Benjamin.
I mean, Kelvin Benjamin turned into a tight end at the end of his career just to stay in the league. So, yeah, the 3-cone drill is very important to me. It's one of the reasons I like Tank Dell so much, and JSN too, just because they were really good in that.
Okay, Quentin Johnston or Treylon Burks? Similar, big, athletic, raw, taking a while to develop.
That's tough. I have Treylon Burks higher, but I haven't gone through and done a full dive of my Dynasty rankings. I mainly just did people we talked about. It's close. I think I still might take the shot on Treylon, but it's very, very close. That's kind of a tough decision because he's hurt again.
You know who's dropped into this group for me too? A guy I love, and I'll take the L. Christian Watson. And basically, it's a Jordan Love thing. They need a quarterback before I can be excited about Christian Watson again.
I tried trading for Christian Watson, and I'm going to shout out Zach from also going for 2, Zach Pulaski. I tried to trade Christian Watson from him, and he has him in, I think he said, 20-something of his 20-something Dynasty leagues. There's only one league he doesn't have Christian Watson, so I just hope Zach's okay. Shout out Zach. Hope you're doing all right.
I'm sure. I'm sure the world ranked.
He's a Packers fan though. So.
Pickleball player is doing just fine on his weekends playing pickleball. What's your 5th and final point here? I think it's going to match well with my 5th and final one.
Yeah, this is one where I'm kind of patting myself on the back a little because I was kind of in the minority on this coming into the year, and it has nothing to do with the talent, but I think we need to kind of look at how we evaluate rookie running backs, especially the ones that come in to a team with especially a younger guy who's already has a defined role and is shown to be productive. And I thought I'd only be talking about Tank Bigsby and Zach Charbonnet, but I'm also going to throw Bijan Robinson into this mix because he's not had the same role we expected. So I'll start with Tank Bigsby. He was projected to kind of come in and eat into Etienne's role, maybe come in as a passing down back because Etienne, his rookie year, did not look good catching the ball. And he even admitted he was nervous when he thought he'd be getting a target. It's not happened yet, not even really close, which Tank Bigsby didn't really do himself any favors in the first few games. He basically handed the ball to the other team and then fumbled. I think he's still going to be good.
He had a pretty good week 1, especially from a usage standpoint, and then he had that like really weird fumble thing, and then like it's been crickets.
Yeah,
so I need to take an L on this because my whole thing was he's going to eat, and he's not better than Etienne, but he's going to eat into Etienne's high value touches. Yeah,
and while I took my position, I also thought there's a good chance I'm going to be wrong on this. And I still could be in the long term. But even Charbonnet, he was even higher on boards than Tank Bigsby. Thought he'd come in and just be the passing down back with Kenneth Walker. Maybe even come in on the goal line because Kenneth Walker wasn't efficient. I mean, he's started to see an increase in the work in the past 2 or 3 games. But I think that's more to Kenneth Walker being banged up than him just being better. And then to touch on Bijan before I wrap it all up, Bijan was expected to come in being the workhorse. I haven't moved him out of RB1 in Dynasty. I'm not worried about that. But I think we do need to use it to kind of evaluate how we evaluate people coming in. He was expected to come and be the workhorse, and Tyler Algier is getting all the goal line work, while Arthur Smith is saying he's a really good goal line back, while the stats say he's one of the worst. So, this has been a weird year. I'm just going to make this little side point, but there's one thing everyone can agree on and one thing that stayed consistent. Fuck Arthur Smith. He's the most hated head coach in all of football right now.
Right. Yeah.
And that's one thing we can all come together on.
Yes.
So wrap this up. I think it seems like the league is wanting a solid insurance policy at the running back position, given the volatility and just general turnover, and teams not wanting to pay big contracts for guys for 3 or 4 years because they might not make it that far because of injuries. So they're either putting people directly into a committee like Bijan. He's on the field a lot, but he's not getting a lot of touches. It's going to help ease the workload, make him better long-term, which I don't disagree with Arthur Smith on that. I just wish he'd get some goal line touches and not give the ball to Algier so much. Or
Jonnu Smith, Dynasty RB1.
Yeah, hand him the ball in the red zone, see what happens. They actually had instead of giving it to Bijan Robinson, they gave an end around to Jonnu Smith for a loss of 2 yards on the 2-yard line. Or they're just going to run the guy in front of them cheap on their rookie contract, run them into the ground and move on, and it's going to be the next guys up. So Charbonnet and Bigsby still have value moving forward. I think we just need to move them back a little bit because especially if they're coming in where guys in the lead role still on a rookie contract, those guys are still going to get used more because it just makes sense for how the league's moving, how they're viewing running backs, not wanting to pay them. We'll just use them while they're on the rookie contract and then use the other guy for a year or two still on theirs and just keep doing that. So I just think we need to reevaluate how unless you're Devon A-Chain running 8 yards a carry, it's not worth paying up for it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think when you talked about trickle down, earlier in the episode, and really, it's just it's how are we adapting? How is it trickling down from the way the NFL now approaches running backs, right? And I think you're really seeing it also now with this 2024 class, where like when you throw on top of the fact that there's not like elite running backs at the top, and throw on top of that what the NFL is doing with running backs, you're going to see guys like whatever, Braylon Allen and, Blake Corum, and like they're not going to be like late firsts maybe in rookie drafts, because we know what the limitations, and we know now, that like the role just isn't there for guys, for most guys, the expanded role just isn't there. And so, that kind of dovetails with my fifth and final point, and that's ill, gross running backs. I hate them all, and it all sucks, and ill, gross running backs make me sad. So because of Arthur Smith, I have Bijan still at number 1, but now in the same tier as Brees Hall, CMC, and JT.
Yeah.
And I look at my running back rankings, and essentially, I just throw up and vomit. I don't want any of them. I poke holes in every single one of them because there's holes to poke. And I don't want any sort of high value running backs on my roster if I'm not, competing or competing like the following year. And we might as well now just treat running backs like redraft. Like I don't want them unless I'm competing. And if I do, I want the guys producing now, treat it like redraft, right? And I think it's one of the reasons why I've been slower to pull some guys up and why I still stubbornly have like a guy like Austin Eckler as RB7 or Saquon as RB9 because Joe, I mean, like it's like if we might as well just treat running back like redraft. Like it's disgusting. I hate it. Like I look at my ranks and I want nobody, right? Bijan is being Arthur Smith. Brees Hall is being Zach Wilson. Christian McCaffrey, he's put up some big weeks here and there, but like, those spike weeks are putting a lot of cologne on an otherwise like, pretty decent RB1 season. And he's only getting like 4 targets a game. Like when he was in Carolina, he was getting 8-10 targets a game. Like he's not getting that in San Francisco, right? JT, right? Okay, held out, has Moss, at least as a competent, back that's gonna limit the touches. He's also getting Minshew'd, right? Like he doesn't have Richardson with him. Jahmyr Gibbs is, listen, he exploded for those 152 yards. It's going to be interesting to see what the split is, but like the Detroit Lions aren't like going to forget about David Montgomery, right? So he's in a split. Etienne, again, he's had some spikes, he's had some long runs, he's had a lot of touchdown cologne, but and he's been involved, in the receiving game a little more than we expected. Right. But like when you look at like week to week consistency and rush to rush consistency, it's not what you'd like. And there's still an opportunity for, the high value touches to be taken by Tank. There's still, the fact that, the offense is feeding, Ridley and Kirk. Right. So Austin Eckler, age and injury. Right. And he's getting Kellen Moore. Achane hurt now. And honestly, like I like him, but and I've certainly come around to like him more. But I mean, if you take him out of that system and put Tyjae Spears in it, can Tyjae Spears do 70% of what Achane is doing?
Oh, yeah.
Probably, right? Saquon Barkley, age, injury, Daniel Jones hurt. Kenneth Walker, his efficiency has improved a little bit this year, but he's still not great. He's still a home run hitter that I saw this chart recently where it was like percentage of times the running back runs to the hole that the play wasn't supposed to be, and then how effective it is on those plays. And Seattle's like in that part of the graph where you don't want to be, right? Yeah. And that's Kenneth Walker, and he's got Charbonnet eating at his heels. Josh Jacobs is like, I don't know, is he expensive Joe Mixon? Right? He's coming on. He's got a good role. He's got a lot of touches, but the offense sucks, and he's been Aiden O'Connell. Javonte Williams, again, coming on. Efficiency is improving, performance is improving, but Jaleel McLaughlin's there, and he's getting Peyton and Rust. Tony Pollard, right? His efficiency is down with his increased volume. The offense isn't using him well. He's getting Mike McCarthy'd and not used in space as much as he should be, and the team is choosing to pass more. DeAndre Swift, we just talked about him kind of coming back to earth. Joe Mixon, great offense, great role, but age and inefficiency. He's disgusting. Do you really want to? I mean, is it fun to click on Joe Mixon? Monty in a split. Pacheco, efficiency improving, receiving improving, but the role will always be limited on the KC offense for running backs like that. Ramondre Stevenson, we talked about him. Derrick Henry, age, declining team. James Cook. I go on and on and on. I'm poking a hole in that's just my top 20 right there. Right, like. Get below that, and there's even more holes. I hate them. I don't want them. But at the same time, I need twice as many of them on my roster as I do wide receivers because of the way the NFL is. So there's my rant. I hate running backs.
No, that's fair. One of the Full Tilt Dynasty leagues we did, I decided to draft a bunch of dusty running backs like Joe Mixon's, Derrick Henry's. That's one of my best leagues because there's my starting running back. Because I think I got Jahmyr Gibbs and then just waited and got guys in 10th through 12th rounds who were just nobody wanted to touch in Dynasty, but they're in my lineup while these other guys are not. So I'm excited to do some startups already for next year just to see. Just to do things different and just kind of see how it would turn out. Because like you said, if I'm not competing, I don't want running backs on my rosters that are playing right now.
Right. And the idea with startups this year was like, oh man, the running backs are falling. There's value there. But like, is there value there? Because like, okay, I get X player in the, whatever, 2 rounds past ADP. He's still a running back, still a committee. There's still volatility with the injuries. Like, what am I getting 2 rounds past ADP?
Yeah.
In the not GF2 staff league that I commish, it's one of the reasons why I made only one running back position. Because I don't want to have to start two or more running backs in a fantasy anymore because I can't unless we do this hot take revolutionary thing. Every league having at least 0.25 points per carry and dipping scoring back down to half PPR to reflect the pass-heavy nature of the NFL because PPR is now an overcorrection and will therefore increase the value of running backs.
I'm down for anything that changes like that. But yeah, that not a going for 2 staff league. My entire 4 flex positions are running backs. Weirdly enough, because we got on after, it's like, I'm surprised people drafted this many running backs. I got Rashad White, Kareem Hunt, Josh Jacobs in my flex spots. And it's better than anyone else. So it's definitely a weird year.
It's weird. It's really just like, is this football now?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, we gotta adjust as the game does and try and stay ahead of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we each did our 5. That's where we're at so far with our mid-season musings and what we might do going forward based on how disgusting and awful everything is this year. Now I have to go finish building my DFS core and vomiting with relying on Sam Howell and Brock Purdy for my riches.
Get your Will Levis lineup in there.
All right. Please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review on the Going for 2 live audio feed. Please make sure here on the YouTube channel you subscribe, like the video, comment, notifications turned on, all the things. Feed the algorithm monster what it must be fed. Time for plugs. Josh, what's up?
Yeah, you can find me tweeting on X at Rotonaut, ROTONAUT. I haven't been tweeting much because Notre Dame sucks this year. The Braves lost in the playoffs. So I've just been depressed at home not tweeting, but I'm going to get back on it. I'm working from home now, so I'm going to get more active on all that, keeping my rankings up. You can find Dynasty rankings at goingfor2.com. And check out our channel in the Going for 2 Discord. You can talk to me and Brian directly, ask us questions, tell us how awful we are, whatever.
You can get in that Discord by going to goingfor2.com and click on the little purple thing in the bottom right. Goingfor2.com is where Josh and I and other people have our Dynasty rankings. I have some articles there. Haven't really been writing in season. I might do something toward the end of the year, kind of similar to this. Like, okay, we vomited over all this sadness in 2023. What do we do now? Like, how do we find an edge? You can find me on Twitter at @FFJunkie_. Also, Dynasty Fever podcast at Dynasty Fever Pod. It's audio only. We've also similarly had to take a lot of breaks this year and really only did one episode in week 7, and we're going to try to come back and finish strong, especially because now pretty soon it's okay, let's talk about the 2024 rookies, right? So, so that's where you can find all our stuff. Going for 2, family of content. Discord has 1 million channels, including one for our show and other shows. We have pretty much a podcast live pretty much every day or night of the week for you. When we're back on, it's every night. We're not abandoning you on Saturday nights. But yeah, have some fun with us. Dynasty, Redraft, DFS, all that jazz. Go to Underdog and use the GF2 promo code, etc., etc., etc. That's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Are we
Yeah, go Irish. I still
Okay.
love them. You suck.